Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Wildcard. I'll be your host this week, Matt. You can follow me on Twitter at MattFFDynasty. And with me, as always, is my lovely co-host, Kev. How are you doing, Kev?
Wow, lovely. That's I think the first time I've ever called me that. Yeah, I'm all right, Matt. Thank you. Yeah, just really tiring day at work. Looking forward to the circle tonight.
Yes.
So we've got to finish this show pretty sharp to get watching that.
Absolutely, we love the circle here at the Fantasy Wildcard. And talking of the circle, there's another guy that likes the circle. He's actually our third co-host, but sadly, got a bit of news about Rich. He's going to be stepping away from the Fantasy Wildcard. And I'll just hand it over to you, Kev. Obviously, you started all this, the podcast and everything. So I'll let you have your words on Rich.
Yeah, I'll try not to be too harsh. First of all, we really want to thank Rich for his time and his efforts here at the Fantasy Wildcard. We started podcasting over at the Fantasy Football Astronauts last March, which led us to grow the show, and it ended up with the creation of Fantasy Wildcard along with yourself, Matt.
Yep.
Without Rich in the beginning, the podcast would have never started, to be honest. It's a lot that we owe to him. First of all, for agreeing to start a show with me and put up with all my really bad jokes and also my Ronald Jones takes. But on behalf of us both, just want to say thank you, Rich. All the best for the future. And thankfully, we don't have to listen to your irrational love of Joe Burrow anymore.
Yeah, I just want to echo the same thing you said, Kev. Obviously, I've got to know Rich over this last year when I guest appeared on your podcast with you two, and I ain't got a bad word to say about Rich, but well, I have, but I wouldn't say it in public. So yeah, I just want to echo what you said and wish Rich all the best in the future. So we'll crack on with the show then. That's a nice little lovely bit we've started on this show, and we'll get on to the actual meat of the show. And we're going to be following on from last week's show where we did the Dynasty quarterback landscape analysis. This week we're going to be moving on to the running back position and highlighting some key themes and questions at the RB position. So Kev, we'll dive straight in. Who's the first running back you want to analyse?
I think you'll like this one, Matt. It's your boy Saquon Barkley. So coming out of Penn State in 2018, he was touted as a generational talent. He met these lofty expectations as a rookie, finishing the RB1 overall, displaying elite rush and receiving usage. Now, he has battled injuries the last 2 years with a high ankle sprain in 2019 and a torn ACL in 2020. But he's still seen as a Dynasty RB1 by some, but his price has dropped a little. He's currently going as the running back 2 with an ADP of pick 7 in Dynasty startups. If we think back to last offseason, he was a consensus top 3 pick. So we know that he's got all the talent in the world, but the injuries do make him a riskier pick in round 1 of startup drafts. As an unbiased Giants fan, Matt, is Saquon appropriately priced in Dynasty leagues for you? What would you pay for him in your current Dynasty leagues?
Yeah, I'll start off by saying I'm definitely not unbiased. I think the first thing I did as soon as I saw Barkley coming to the Giants, I was straight on getting a jersey with Barkley on the back. So I'm definitely not unbiased. But yeah, I understand what you're saying about obviously his price. It has dropped from what it was last off season, but we do have to factor in the fact that obviously the injuries and really, if you've owned him these last couple of seasons, you've been disappointed, I think, really, that he had a slow finish to the 2019 season, obviously with that high ankle sprain, and then you've not had him at all, really, in 2020, apart from that first game. So I do understand why the price has dropped. And for me, I think he is becoming a bit of a value if he is dropping down that low. I've seen him go as low as the RB5, RB6 even in Dynasty. So at that value, yeah, I'm getting it all day. But yeah, I understand the concerns with the injuries and everything. I still have him as my RB2. I think I've got him at. It's close, I think, between Barkley, Kamara, and Jonathan Taylor in that group after McCaffrey. So yeah, if he's at that price, I'm fine paying it. I still think he's an elite running back. He's arguably, for me, as you say, I'm biased because I'm a Giants fan, but as a running back, I think is one of the best running backs in the NFL, regardless of fantasy or real life. I think in real life is by far the best running back. But what would I pay to get him? I think you're still going to have to pay top money. If you can give up an aging asset at running back, maybe somebody like It's one we're going to talk about next, actually, Derrick Henry, and then throw in, you're going to have to throw in picks to get him as well. Superflex, maybe a mid first, so you give him back a strong running back, but adding that little extra value to get Barkley, I'd be fine with doing something like that. But yeah, what do you think, Kev? What would you be willing to pay?
I mean, I think his pricing in existing leagues is probably near to 3 first rounders still. I think.
Yeah.
I actually do think it's really tricky to get him in existing leagues because the teams that have got him, they obviously value him. They've kept him through his injury. They're expecting a big season coming up. I think your best chance of getting Barkley is in your startups, where, like you said, Matty has been sliding to RB5. Sometimes seen him at the back end of round 1, start of round 2, and it's fully expected that in your dynasty startups that there'll be a run on QBs at the start. So I think whichever running back does fall out of those 5, whichever drops the furthest, you're going to get a fantastic value. And there's a great chance it will be Saquon if there's owners still worried about those injuries we mentioned and the Giants' offense as a whole. It is. Would you say the Giants' offense is a concern for you?
I'd like to think that they're going to address that this offseason. If we can get a stud wide receiver, obviously there's a lot of top free agents coming through. We know the talent in this draft class as well. I think if the Giants can get somebody like that just to get the box a little emptier for him and let him have a bit more space, then I think Barkley's going to be fine. I think he's proven it before. I think if anything that the situation's getting better every season in regards to the offense. Obviously that rookie season, it was dreadful, and it still finishes the RB1 in fantasy. So for me, I just think it's fine and it's improving every year. So that's not a concern for me personally. And I think, as you say, with the value, I think this is going to be the lowest it's at. As soon as we start seeing those clips on Twitter of him putting in the work and the training clips, I think his value is going to start creeping back up. So I'd say this is probably the key time to grab him if you can.
Indeed, and I think even if the Giants are still bad again, there's examples like James Robinson last season. He was on the worst team in football, and he was still a top 8 running back. So not all hope is lost, even if the Giants, fingers crossed, are still trash.
Yeah, which they won't be. So we'll move on to the second running back, and I've gone for Derrick Henry on this one. Obviously, the man mounting himself, 6'3", 250 pounds, an absolute unit, coming off an unreal 2,000-yard rushing season where he finishes the RB3, and he's locked in as the Titans' lead rusher on an offense that it basically runs through him. He is the offense. So yeah, all signs great for Henry in 2020. We're averaging 23.6 rushes per game. So, as I say, getting that huge workload. And he's also unstoppable at the goal line. And that is a fact because he had 17 rushing attempts inside the 5-yard line. And can you guess how many touchdowns he got, Kev?
Well, I can look on the show sheet.
It was 17. He got every single one. So, as I say, you just can't stop him. He's getting 5 yards at that goal line. So, all good really in 2020, but the big concern, the one that everybody talks about, is that pass usage. It's basically non-existent. 76 receptions in his 5 seasons in the NFL. It's not great, and you know how much we love a pass catching running back, Kev. So that is where the concerns start. And obviously he's getting older as well. 27 years old. That is that age that we keep going on about. The cliff is approaching, and I think a lot of the owners are going to be starting to worry. So with his current ADP at the RB6, we're now at that stage where it's time to move on, jump off Henry and get that value if he is the RB6.
Yeah, I think no matter where you are in your cycle, you've got to be strongly considering moving off Henry. Not only is the age a concern, but also the week-to-week volatility and the new offense. Former OC, Arthur Smith's now the head coach of the Falcons. He used Derrick Henry way better than Matt LaFleur previously. So who's to say the new OC, Todd Downing, continues to get the best out of him? There's also questions surrounding the other key parts of the offense. Both Corey Davis and Jonnu Smith are free agents, which means it might be a less potent offense moving forward, maybe less touchdown opportunity as well. And then, like I said, he's going into he's going to be 27, and that pass usage is pretty scary. I think if you're a contender, I think you've got to consider moving off him for other guys with potential top 5 ceilings like Cam Akers, Antonio Gibson, etc. And if you're not a contender and you've got Henry on your roster, what are you doing? Get him off your roster right now. It makes complete sense to get rid. I think it's slightly different in startups. It all depends on what spot he does fall to in your drafts. But at running back 6, I'll be having 0 shares of Henry this off-season. Whereabouts are you comfy taking him in startups?
Well, it's funny. I've got a little secret, Kev. I've actually joined my first startup. I've held off all this time, and I'm currently in a startup. So yeah, Jesse on Twitter hit me up, and he basically twisted my arm. So I'm in a startup, and guess who I drafted?
No.
I actually got Derrick Henry, but I got him in the 4th round, and it was the RB 15. So I mean, to me, that's value. You've got to take value. Whatever you think about him, that's value to me. And if we're getting in towards the season and I'm concerned, I mean, I'm building my roster. I'll see how it looks at the end of it all. But if I am concerned, I'm going to move him. And I think I'm going to get more than what I've got him in the startup for. So I would just say that's going to be the area where I think you're going to get him cheapest. Because if you've got to pay RB6 to grab him that kind of value when you're trading, it's going to be giving up a lot. So definitely agree with you that in startups, that's going to be the best area to be grabbing him. And I think we mentioned it the other week when we had Marvin on as a guest. He mentioned about potentially trading Derrick Henry for somebody like Antonio Gibson, Cam Akers, and you could probably get a little piece thrown in. I think Dynasty owners are starting to get a bit more clued up now. The off season's obviously progressing on, and we're all starting to get excited about these younger running backs. But if you can do something like that, that's definitely a move I'd be making.
Yeah, it's funny you mention RB16. I've got in my rankings, I've actually got Henry even lower than that, which is pretty mind blowing. I've got him at RB20, but that's as it stands today. I do my rankings based on right in this moment, and that's with guys like Corey Davis and Jonnu Smith not there. I think if they keep them or if they get some pretty solid veteran replacements, because it's no good really having a rookie replacement for Corey Davis because it might take him time to hit, and Henry's window's right now. I think if they do re-sign, he'll shoot back up, and I'm guessing he'll probably be near that RB1 cusp for me. But RB16 is a fine spot to be taken. I'm guessing you took him round 4. It's probably running back 2, which I think it's a lot less risk. In your first couple of rounds, you want to avoid risk, but I think in round 4, that's when you can start shooting for upside. Yeah,
absolutely. I fully agree. And I understand the concerns, and I think it's going to be an interesting one to see how the off-season plays out, and we get a bit more of a clearer picture of how it's going to play out for Henry. So we'll move on to your next running back then, Kev. Who we got?
Yeah, gone for Frankenstein himself, David Montgomery. Last year's running back 4, he's been touted as a popular dynasty sell all off-season. He did flash bell cow potential down the stretch. He was actually running back 1 over the last 6 weeks of the 2020 season. But this was aided by a cake schedule and increased pass usage, leading to 54 catches on the year. Obviously, there was the injury to Tariq Cohen, who averaged 75 catches over the previous 2 seasons. Now, Cohen will return, and he is entering the 2nd year of a 3-year, $17 million deal. Monty's now going as the running back 22 in Dynasty startups, which suggests the market has corrected or potentially overcorrected on his Dynasty value. So what I want to know, Matt, is will Montgomery's pass usage look like it did in 2020? And where do you stand on him in Dynasty?
Yeah, I think it is going to drop back down again. Obviously, we saw it at the start of the year when Cohen was there. We know how good Cohen is in the passing game. I think he's a great target in PPR leagues. You can always get him later on, and I'm a big fan of having somebody like Cohen that gets those receptions. So yeah, I am concerned about the pass usage, and as you mentioned, that cake schedule, I think that inflated his value a little bit going towards the end of the 2020 season. So when we first entered the off season, I wasn't high on Montgomery at all. He was somebody that I was trying to move in any leagues. I did have him, but as you say, I think people are starting to get a bit more clued up now. They're starting to realize that the schedule definitely inflated those numbers, and now he's becoming a bit of a value. It's a shock to say, but I've had people hitting me up on Twitter and asking about Montgomery, and the value that he's going at now is probably too low, because he is still going to get a good chunk of the workload. I don't expect the Bears to bring in another running back to compete with him in regards to carrying the ball. So I think he's got that solid workload. I wouldn't expect the numbers that he put up at the end of the 2020 season, but I do think he's a solid low end RB1, maybe definitely a high end RB2. So somebody that I'm fine to have now if it now has become at that value. So yeah, what do you think on him, Kev?
I think he deserves more of a role in the past game. Obviously, Tariq Cohen's great, but thinking about the offense outside of Allen Robinson and Tariq Cohen, there's Cole Kmet, who's potentially a breakout, and Darnell Mooney, but they're both young guys. I still think there's plenty in the offense to get Montgomery sufficient touches in the past game. I think as well, people talk about the rush usage with Montgomery, that he got a lot more work, but actually, if you compare his stats with his rookie season, there wasn't a ton of difference in the rush game. It was just the pass game usage that got him the more opportunity, the more points. But yeah, I think at running back 22, that's insane. You're pretty much guaranteeing he's going to be an RB2. So yeah, I'd be fine taking him at that spot. I actually had a bit of a nightmare towards the end of last season. I got offered him in like week 10 for a mid-second, and I could see, obviously everyone can see on Sleeper the green schedule and the upcoming stretch, and I just couldn't do it because I'm not a huge Montgomery fan. I don't believe in the talent, but as always, the situation played out as it did, and I mean, if I had him now, I'd be trying to sell him, but I guess if his value is RB22, maybe I wouldn't get much back.
Yeah, and it's also going to be interesting to see what the Bears do at quarterback. Obviously, Trubisky is moving on. We don't really know who's going to be the Bears starting quarterback. I mean, we're in talks to Deshaun Watson, Russell Wilson. If either of those two guys come in, then it's going to be really interesting to see how it plays out with Montgomery. So yeah, definitely somebody I'll be keeping an eye on in the off season and seeing how his situation. How it turns out.
Yeah, I've also heard Gardner Minshew, so it could be anyone.
Well, yeah, that's like you couldn't get too further apart, could you? Really, from Watson and Wilson to Minshew. Jeez,
booby prize.
So we'll move on to the next. Well, it's actually a collective I want to talk about. It's the Jets backfield. We obviously know how bad the Jets were in 2020, winning just the 2 games, and now obviously they've got the second overall pick. But I think there is light at the end of the tunnel for the Jets, and I think they could be in line for quite a quick turnaround. And the backfield itself, it's actually really intriguing me at the moment. Obviously, we know they've got a new head coach now, Robert Saleh. He's the former 49ers defensive coordinator. Spent 3 years studying under Pete Carroll in Seattle with the Seahawks early in his career, and obviously working alongside Kyle Shanahan for a large part of his career. So if he does bring that Kyle Shanahan style offense, I think it's going to be a really exciting spot in regards to the running back position, because we obviously know that the fantasy production that we get out of that San Francisco backfield, even when it's people that you don't get excited about, but when they land on that offense, that they become an exciting prospect. So currently, they've only got the Michael P. Ryan and Ty Johnson, so neither of those guys are really interesting to me. We know that the Jets have got the cap space, so I fully believe they're either going to get a free agent or potentially draft a running back at some point during the draft. So, who would be your ideal player to land on the Jets, Kev? Whether it be in free agency or a rookie?
I think first, I just want to say I don't think the Jets is the ideal landing spot for any free agent or rookie running back. I do think there's better spots out there, but I'll tackle this question as thinking about the Jets as an organisation. I think obviously likely there'll be a rookie QB, the new head coach, a team in transition. It's probably a 4-5 win team initially in my eyes. They're going to play from behind a ton. Obviously, you mentioned the new offense. Mike LaFleur's come over from the 49ers along with the coach Saleh, and he's actually the brother of Packers head coach Matt LaFleur. And like I said, he'll be installing a similar offense to the 49ers, which emphasizes outside zone schemes, zone rushing, and also targeting the running backs in the pass game. The 49ers were 4th in running back targets in 2020. Now, with all that in mind, I think the running back that is the best fit for the Jets, in my eyes, is Aaron Jones. We've seen that he's a capable pass catcher. I think he could thrive and catch 60 to 70 passes on the Jets. He's got the speed and vision to thrive in the outside zone, and he also played under the new OC's brother for the Packers already, so might put a good word in for him, maybe not. I think as a Jones owner, I would prefer for him to land with the Dolphins, but I do think he's the best fit for the Jets. We also have a ton of cap room to get a deal done if they wish. Who did you have in mind for the Jets, Matt?
Yeah, like you, obviously, with mentioning the cap space, I think that they've got that ability to go for arguably the best running back in this free agency group, and that is Aaron Jones. And I think he would be a great fit there. You mentioned he can catch the ball. He's shown it with the Packers, and obviously he's a great runner as well. So that would be one player that I think is great. I also do think there's a potential that they could target the running back in the draft. Obviously, we know they've got the 2 first-round picks, and they're obviously going to have that early second-round pick as well. So 3 spots there where they could grab one. I very much doubt they're getting one with the second overall pick. But you could maybe be thinking that 23rd pick in the first, that is potentially maybe somewhere Najee Harris or Travis Etienne, they're the 2 highly regarded running backs. Potentially they could grab one there, or maybe even wait to the second. And if they can grab somebody like Etienne, I think we just mentioned with that Kyle Shanahan style offense, if you get somebody like him, because I know for me personally, I'd love to see Etienne land on the 49ers and use that pace and that explosiveness on their offense. So if they're bringing a similar kind of offensive style over to the Jets, I think that could be a great pick for them. But obviously we do know the Jets have other needs as well. So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out, but they've got the capital to draft one. So it wouldn't shock me at all if they did.
Yeah, you're a smart guy, Matt. I knew you were going to say Etienne. I had a feeling, but I think we've just got to watch a bit later on in the show, see if his name comes up again, maybe.
Yeah, and if they don't grab him, they could always grab Michael Carter.
Oh no!
I had to throw it in. I'm sorry. So we'll move on to your next running back then, Kev. Before I get too carried away.
Yeah, sure. So it's Ezekiel Elliott. I think wow, the mighty have fallen. He was going as a Dynasty running back 3 or 4 in August, and now he's got the ADP of running back 11. I mean, it's partly due to a poor year without Dak, where he finished as a running back 9, but also with him in his age 26 season. Also, his backup, Tony Pollard, looked pretty good with the increased usage last year. Some people even said Tony Pollard's better, which I think's quite funny. It's not true at all. And then we got the news yesterday that Dak's re-signed a long-term deal with the Cowboys, so it's worth noting Elliott was running back 3 in the 5 games Dak played before his injury cut his season short. So with all that in mind, Matt, is Zeke a buy low type running back for you? And what is his ceiling in this Cowboys offense in 2021?
Yeah, I'm not sure if you remember, Kev, but during the season, I was saying I'm happy to buy Zeke low. I think he was still a good buy. Yeah, I'm gonna pat myself on the back for that one. I still think he's a buy low. As you just mentioned, the fact that now Dak has re-signed, that was a huge thing for me. You just mentioned it was the RB3 for those first 5 games. And I think it did affect him, obviously, when Dak got hurt. The offense as a whole took a big drop off. So that didn't help his situation at all. And I think also it's worth mentioning the fact that he had COVID at the start of the year coming into the season. And I'm hearing things that Cam Newton mentioned it. He didn't feel the same after it. I mean, could we put it down to that potentially, that he just didn't feel himself during the season? So I definitely think that could be something. So yeah, I'm happy to buy low on him, and I did during the season. I was happy to grab him, and I still believe in him. At 26 years old, I know we've mentioned it earlier about that age drop, but the cliff at that age, but I still think he's got years in him. He's got that long-term contract as well. That gives him that little bit of security as well. So I'm fully happy to have him. And as regards to his ceiling, I think he can bounce back. Maybe not to being going early in the first round in startups, but I think he can definitely be a top 5 running back in fantasy. And yeah, that would be my ceiling for him. With that back, I think he can definitely bounce back to that. What's your feelings on him, Kev?
I think with the Dak news, his ADP is going to creep up a little now. I think that was partly baked into the ADP, the concerns about Dak. I think with me, I'm still on the side of things where I prefer Elliott as my running back 2. I think he's running back 11 in my rankings, but I wouldn't feel comfortable with him as a running back 1, just because I think he's had a ton of touches. He is entering his age 26 season. And we don't know what's going to happen if Tony Pollard's going to get more touches. I do think Elliott will still be fine. That's a cracking offense he's in. And We saw with Dak, he was, well, like I said, the running back 3, but I'd be a lot happier if he was my running back 2 was like a high-end running back 2 for me than my running back 1, unless I'm punting the position, which I don't tend to do anyway. So, I'd prefer him as the second guy on my team.
Yeah, and I think if you're doing startups now, you've got potential to probably grab him as your RB2. So, yeah, I feel a lot more safer having him as my RB2 as well. But I mean, if you have to have him as your RB1, I don't think is a bad option at those kind of that range of players that go around that ADP. I don't think is a bad option at all. We know the workload, as you mentioned, Pollard. We don't know how that's going to play out, but I still think Zeke with his size and his style of plays, he's still going to see plenty of touches for me. And with that, and I expect the O-line as well to improve. Obviously, there was injuries and what have you with the O-line, so that I don't think that helped either. So I'm fully expecting a bounce back from Elliott. Just as I say, maybe not to the level that we know of Zeke, but I definitely think he can bounce back from last season.
And maybe if you do take him as your RB1, you focus on hitting a younger running back, running back 2, maybe like a Javonte Williams or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So speaking of young running backs, I'll move on to my next one. Me and Kev did say we weren't going to talk about the 2020 running backs, but I had to talk about Jonathan Taylor. I'm sorry, Kev, but I had to do it. He had obviously that frustrating start to his rookie season, but boy, did he turn it around in the second half. RB3 through the last 7 weeks, and that was despite missing a game in that stretch. And he finishes the RB6 overall. So just goes to show how much he did manage to turn it around in the back half of last season. And it showed he's a strong runner, averaging 5 yards per carry, but also his potential in the passing game. He had 36 receptions for just under 300 yards and a 92% catch rate. So all those that doubted his pass catching ability, I think he put that to bed with his catch rate. So it's just, for me, he's just the ideal running back. He's got that perfect blend of size and speed to be an absolute true workhorse in the NFL. Now, obviously, we do know Nyheim Hines is there. He's still under contract in 2020, and that could potentially limit Taylor's upside because we're now going to pass catcher who were. And that was the reason why a lot of Taylor owners were getting frustrated because Nyheim Hines was coming in and vulturing a lot of his touches. So, do you have any concerns with that, Kev, in regards to his receiving work in 2020 with, so I just mentioned, with Nyheim Hines, and also the change at quarterback as well, obviously Carson Wentz coming over and being the quarterback now instead of dump off Phillip Rivers?
I'll try not to go too over the top on Jonathan Taylor. You know I'm a massive fan of his, so I'll just try and be as unbiased and normal as possible. So first off, I'll begin by saying that Taylor put to bed his concerns around his pass catching ability in his rookie season. He caught 36 of 39 balls, 87.8% catch rate, which was the running back 2 in the NFL. So we know Phillip Rivers has been known to target the running back at a high rate with solid efficiency. I do think losing Rivers and gaining Wentz is far from ideal for the pass catching efficiency for JT. Wentz was horrible in 2020, hitting Miles Sanders at a 54% catch rate. However, last year was a complete mess for the Eagles as a whole. If we go back a year further to 2019, it was a lot better for Wentz. He hit Sanders on 50 catches on 63 targets, which was a 79% catch rate. So I'm not too concerned about that. I'm also not concerned regarding Nyheim Hines. He'll get some touches, especially in comeback mode and the 2-minute drill scenarios, but we've got to remember Jonathan Taylor's not an 80 catch guy. Can still be a top 3 running back with his elite rushing and his touchdown upside. I think similar to a guy like Dalvin Cook over the past 2 years, that's how he's going to perform in fantasy. I'm actually pretty excited for the potential overall for a better offense for the Colts, giving the further touchdown upside and rush play controlling the game for the Colts. So I'm not concerned about Wentz or Hines for JT's pass upside, but one concern I do have, or one thing I do wonder about, is the rush ability of Wentz. Do you think that's got potential to hurt Taylor in your eyes, Matt?
As you just mentioned, I think that is potentially a a slight issue for Taylor. But then you've just mentioned about how Wentz arriving. I think it's going to elevate the offense as a whole. So if they are able to be in a bit more commanding positions in 2021, then obviously Taylor's going to be seeing a little bit more work in trying to ice games and wind down the clock. So in regards to that, I think it flips either way. Obviously, whatever Wentz is going to knock off in regards to his rushing, I think he's going to add it back with the Colts becoming a lot better franchise and leading games a lot more. And yeah, I think I'm not. It doesn't concern me anyway, Kev. I mean, we know how much we love Jonathan Taylor here, so I don't think anything could put me off Jonathan Taylor, if I'm being honest. He's, as I say, he's just got all the traits you want in a running back. The fact that he has shown that he can be used in the passing game as well. I'd like to think that the Colts they're gonna realise. Obviously, last season was frustrating when somebody like Jordan Wilkins kept coming on and vulturing touches, and then obviously that with Nyheim Hines as well. I'd like to think now that the Colts they've realised what they've got in Taylor, and they're going to carry on that kind of usage that he got towards the back end of the 2020 season.
And I think as well, like, if Wentz is horrible at hitting pass catch out the backfield, that's got to be a knock for Nyheim Hines' chance of getting on the pitch as well. Like, if that's not working, you're probably going to see more of Taylor. So I think, yeah, we just love him, don't we?
I know, yeah. It's hard to say a bad thing, isn't it, about Jonathan Taylor? So we'll move on then, Kev. Who do you want to talk about next?
So a little bit like yourself, Phil, I'm going to focus on a backfield as a whole. I'm going to look at the Atlanta backfield. So I know the Falcons will be a sore subject for you, Matt, after the cliff of your 2020 RB1, Todd Gurley. I can't even say that without laughing then. It's not funny. He actually had a fair start to the year, but he did run like a corpse down the stretch. He's now out of contract and extremely unlikely to be back or retain a starting role in 2021. As I mentioned before, new coach Arthur Smith enters his debut season after getting the best out of Derrick Henry the last couple of years. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how this offense looks as a whole and what type of backfield this will be, what type of running back they target and go for. Who do you like as a starting running back in 2021, and what sort of dynasty value will they hold on the Falcons?
Who would I like? I want Todd Gurley back, Kev. Try and save a bit of face. No, I think a rookie. I think that's going to be. I think they're in a great position to grab a rookie. Najee Harris is the one that I would absolutely love. You've just mentioned with obviously Arthur Smith coming over from the Titans, and with Derrick Henry, there's a lot of comps between Najee Harris and Derrick Henry. Even though I think Najee Harris is a lot better in the passing game. And a lot more fluid on his feet. So yeah, if Najee Harris lands there, then I'm super excited about that. As a potential free agency, could they get somebody like Chris Carson? I think he could work in an offense like this. I just think as a whole, this backfield is going to be good for fantasy. I'd like to believe that they're going to give the workload to the running back. So whichever running back lands on the Falcons, it's definitely one of my top landing spots, whether it be for the free agents or the rookies. In regards to dynasty value, obviously it depends what player it is. If we're talking about somebody like Chris Carson, then it is going to be good for him, but I wouldn't go too crazy on it and shoot him up my rankings. But if it is somebody like Najee Harris, who I'm really high on, out of this rookie class, then it's going to be tougher. I think it's going to be like a bit like Jonathan Taylor, Kev. I'm going to become a bit unbearable if somebody like Najee Harris lands on this backfield. But yeah, what do you think? Have you got anybody in mind that you'd like to see on that backfield?
I'm not sure I've got anybody in mind that stands out in particular, but I just think it is really interesting spot. We hear a lot of people talk about how Miami is a great spot and the Steelers are a great spot. I've not seen too many people talk about the Falcons, but when you think about that offense with Matt Ryan, with Julio, Calvin Ridley, Hayden Hurst, and a new coach that's done pretty well with Derrick Henry, he got him on the right track. He got the most out of AJ Brown and finally Corey Davis this season. I think it's a really exciting offense to be have a part of. I think the guy that probably stands out to me as someone that would be interesting there is Javonte Williams. I think he's got a free down skill set. I think Najee Harris as well will be a great fit for similar reasons, and they'd be more than attainable in round 2. I think pretty much whichever running back ends up in Atlanta, because it's a wide open backfield and they're going to get the majority of the volume, you're going to see them shoot up draft boards. You never know. There might even be a surprise, like a running back, a free agent running back you don't expect to maybe leave, like Jamal Williams, for example, if he ended up landing there as the pass catching side to some early down guy. I'd quite like him for Dynasty as well.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I do think it is arguably for me, I think it is one of the better landing spots alongside Steelers. I do like that as a landing spot as well. But I think the Falcons are right up there as a really good landing spot, and it's definitely going to be interesting to see what they do in the draft and in free agency and how it plays out. But all I know is that if there's a guy that they bank on and they're going to give him the touches, I'm on board with whoever that guy is.
Just realised I just touted 2 Jay Williams running backs to the Falcons, so I'm giving myself two shots at that prediction.
I think I prefer Javonte over Jamal there, if I'm honest. But
Agreed.
Yeah, whoever it is, it's definitely going to be an exciting landing spot. So we'll move on then to the next running back, and I've gone for Melvin Gordon on this one. Obviously, he had his first season with the Broncos. Nothing exciting, but it's just a rock solid RB2. Received a really solid workload, 215 carries, which was 9th in the NFL, so he got a really good amount of usage. And then also adding 32 receptions on top of that, and he finishes the RB14, which I think might surprise a few people because, as I say, it was nothing exciting, but it was just solid. He has been throughout his career just a really solid running back. Obviously, we know he shared that backfield with Philip Lindsay, but Lindsay got about half the carries to what Gordon did. So Gordon definitely came in and claimed that backfield as his own. I think Lindsay, he is going to possibly be tender. From what I've read, they are going to retain him. So that's going to be interesting to see how it does play out. I think, if I'm honest, I think it'd be quite good if they do in regards to Gordon, because we've seen how it's played out with Lindsay in the past. So I don't think that's going to be an issue in regards to Gordon's fantasy production. And yeah, for me, I think he is going to be the lead back in 2021. And as I say, I just think he's a really solid RB2 in fantasy. And I think it's probably one of the cheaper RB2s that you can get in Dynasty. Is this somebody you'd be targeting, Kev, if you were a contender?
I mean, first of all, I'm quite stunned he was a running back 14. I didn't actually realise that. It just shows that at that position, you don't have to be great if you're getting the volume. Yet again, a solid touchdown scoring season for him. He's scored at least 8 touchdowns in every year since I think he scored none as a rookie, but every season since he's scored 8 or more. There's potential for more opportunity as well in 2021 with the return of Cortland Sutton, the growth of young guys like Judy and Fanton, plus a likely upgrade over future tour guide Drew Lock. That's pretty funny actually, because I did some research and he did have a major in that industry. So I did put it in there for a reason.
It's nice that you started to think a bit more about your jokes now, Ken.
Yeah, I thought I'll put a bit of context in the joke, and I'll explain it as well. So that's probably ruined the joke now. But there is a lot of reason to be into Melvin Gordon in the short term as a cheap running back 2 on a contending team. In my eyes, Melvin Gordon is discount Josh Jacobs, someone who's productive as a touchdown scorer, will struggle to hit 40 catches, but the major difference is the cost. Jacobs only averaged 2.2 more fantasy points per game in 2020 than Gordon, and I wouldn't be shocked if that's even close with this better Broncos offense in 2021. Now, if you're a contender, would you be willing to give up the likes of the 110, 111 for a guy like Gordon, or would you be looking to aim a bit higher?
I think if you was in a super flex league, I think that might be a little bit too much for me, because obviously we know there's a lot of stud quarterbacks in this 2021 draft class. So you feel like a lot of good players are going to get pushed back towards the back end of that first round in Superflex. But if it's a 1 QB league, I'd be fine giving up something like that. I mentioned today actually on Twitter that I'm not overly blown away by this running back class outside of a couple of guys. So I mean, if you can get somebody like Gordon at cheap value, then I'll be fine doing something like that. It's always a bit of a risk this early in the off season because we don't know how it's going to play out in the off season. I'd like to think that they've got other areas that they're going to address and let Gordon have another shot at being the lead back again. As we said, it was great in what he did last season and completely fine as a running back for them. So yeah, I think it's a risk, but I wouldn't give that much up if it was a Superflex league, but in a one QB league, I think that's fine value.
Can I ask you a question, Matt?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Do you play a lot of 1 QB leagues?
I think I'm in about 2 or 3, so it's definitely predominantly Superflex leagues.
I just thought it really interesting because I'm not actually in a 1 QB league. I think it's a bit like redraft.
Yeah.
In the sense that it's something that it was probably more relevant a couple of years ago. All the leagues I'm in are Superflex, so I just wondered how many you were in.
The 1 QB leagues that I am in, they're all ones that are like pretty much my first league. So as you mentioned, I think it is definitely heading towards a more Superflex being the norm, and I fully agree with it. I think Superflex is a far better format, but just had to put it out there, Kev. There'll be listeners that still like 1 QB league. I know you're all hip and trendy and with the times, Kev, but there'll be listeners that are in 1 QB league. So I just want to put a bit of perspective on that.
Hip and trendy now. I've upgraded my Internet Explorer.
So we'll move on then, Kev. Who have you got next?
Someone else that's hip and trendy. It's Christian McCaffrey. Consensus RB1 in Dynasty startups as we speak. He's held his ADP despite an injury ravaged 2020. Did only manage 3 games, but in those games he averaged over 30 points per contest. 100 catches, 1,000 rush yards, and 15 total touchdowns will be well within his grasp in 2021. He'll be playing in his age 25 season next year, but his type of usage and pretty clean injury history makes him the clear running back 1 in Dynasty in my eyes. So I want to know where you'd be willing to take him in Dynasty startups in round 1, which spot early on in those drafts, and what impact does his return have on the rest of the skill position players for the Panthers?
Yeah, well, I definitely think he is my RB1 in fantasy. And I think you're potentially going to get him at a bit of a value, I think, in startups. Everybody's becoming obsessed with the quote, obviously talking Superflex now, Kev, because that's what everybody plays apparently. But in Superflex leagues, everybody's going to be targeting those quarterbacks. For me, if you can get McCaffrey mid first, I think there's a chance you're going to get him mid first. As I say, the quarterbacks, Mahomes, Kyler Murray, Dak Prescott now is re-signed. There's definitely going to be quarterbacks that are going ahead of him. So I'm definitely grabbing him if he falls to that mid-first range. And I wouldn't be surprised to see it happen. So that's definitely going to be where I think you're going to get him at his best value. The one thing I would maybe have a slight concern about is do the Panthers maybe bring in another running back just to try and ease that workload a little bit? We saw how good Mike Davis was, obviously, with the Panthers when McCaffrey went down. Do they maybe now think, well, he is their key asset. He is somebody that basically the offense, he is the big part of that offense. Do they maybe want to try and just take a little workload off him and bring in a vet running back potentially, or maybe even just a rookie running back that can ease that workload and hopefully reduce the chance of getting a recurrence of what we saw this year? That would be something that I'd have in mind. But either way, it still wouldn't affect me having him as my RB1. I still think he's a fantastic running back. In regards to the skill position players, I think it has to not the ones that get the shorter passes. Obviously, we know how good McCaffrey is in receiving game. He gets plenty of receptions out of the backfield. So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out with somebody like DJ Moore. I think Curtis Samuel, I think he'll be moving on, won't he, from the Panthers? If they start having DJ Moore doing more of the shorter routes, then it could potentially harm him a little bit. But I just think because the whole offense is going to improve, I think that's only a good thing in regards to the offense and the other skill position players.
Yeah, I think for me with McCaffrey, he's in that running back tier on his own. I think I'd probably be looking to take him as early as like 104, 105 in drafts. I think you've obviously got guys at top like Mahomes and Josh Allen, Kyler Murray, maybe even Deshaun Watson, but there's fears that he might sit out the season. So until that becomes a little bit clearer, I think you have to be a brave soldier to be taking him at 104 over McCaffrey. So yeah, 104 is where I'd probably start considering McCaffrey in your dynasty startups.
Yeah, I don't hate that. I just think in Superflex leagues, I think a lot of owners, they panic, don't they? That if I missed the boat on quarterback, then we know what it's like. I've been in a league where I've rolled the dice a little too much. I've played chicken a little too much, and I've ended up with some like Teddy Bridgewater. I've basically got quarterbacks that have got no longevity to them, and that's not what you want in a Superflex league. So I think that is why people are starting to smash quarterback early in that first round. And it wouldn't shock me to see your first 5-6 picks being a quarterback in Superflex leagues. So yeah, if I can get him at the 106, I'm delighted with that.
I just worry a bit about DJ Moore. You mentioned him then, like he's going really high in dynasty startups. He's going like in the 3rd round, and I've seen him as high as wide receiver 5, even higher potentially. And I just think if in last season, on a team where that defense was so bad, that was passing a ton, and no McCaffrey, if he can't have a wide receiver 1 season, I think he's a little bit overhyped. I do love the talent, but I just think at that wide receiver 5 to 7 range. I know Mike mentioned him on the last show, and I've heard other big guys in the industry be really high on DJ Moore, really smart guys, but wide receiver 5, wide receiver 7, I think that's pretty crazy to me.
Yeah, I think that is just as you mentioned. We know the talent, and I'm a big believer in his talent. But yeah, it's a funny one with DJ Moore, because obviously he had all that hype last off season. Then as the season played out, I think his value started to drop, and I've seen a lot of people move on from him and try and move off for him. But then when he started picking pace again up in the second half of the season, that hype started to build back up, and now we've reached a point where it's back into overdrive again. So yeah, it is going to be interesting to see how it plays out. I think if the news breaks that Samuel's definitely leaving, I think that's only going to elevate his hype even more. So, yeah, I mean, you've mentioned those numbers. Wide receiver 5, it is crazy to me. But I'm sure Mike will have you if he listens to this. He'll be coming after you for that one, Kev.
Well, he came after me. When I ranked someone pretty decent over him, and they were like at him me. So yeah, sorry, Mike.
No, we love Mike, and I fully endorsed it. I did tell him in the DMs to go after you, so I'll take blame for that one. So we'll move on to my next running back. Then I've gone for another old boy. I've gone for David Johnson. Coming off a pretty solid bounce back season last season with the Texans, following his trade from the Cardinals. He finishes the RB21, but it was the RB13 in fantasy points per game amongst RBs that played 10 games or more. So overall, he had a pretty solid season. Achieved 1,000 yards from scrimmage with his use, and obviously as a runner, but also in the receiving game. He actually had a career high in yards per carry, averaging 4.7 yards, and as I say, the passing game as well, he had over 300 receiving yards. So just kind of coming back to the old DJ that we all got excited about. He has now restructured his contract, so it looks like he's going to be back in 2021. And obviously, my old crush Duke Johnson, he's left now. So who's challenging him for touches? There's basically nobody behind David Johnson. I do expect him to bring somebody in, considering David Johnson's age and obviously that injury history that he does have. So I do expect him to bring somebody in, but I just feel like David Johnson's going to get another chance to be the start, and I think he's deserved it after that strong end to the 2020 season. And yeah, that's going to be fresh in people's mind. It was the RB4 over those last 3 weeks, so I think that's going to be fresh in people's mind, and potentially to a sell high opportunity if you aren't on David Johnson and you want to move off that older guy. I think people are still going to have that in their minds, and you potentially do have a little opportunity, as I mentioned, with Duke Johnson moving on as well. I think his hype's probably going to be the highest it is going to be throughout this off season. So what would you look to do with David Johnson? Are you looking to sell him off that hype, with him currently being the only RB basically in Houston, or are you happy to have him as a solid RB2 in 2021?
I don't know how much hype there is on David Johnson in Dynasty right now. I mean, he's 29 years old. He'll be 30 in the season, and he's currently going as running back 35 in Dynasty startups. So I think selling him, you're unlikely to get any more than a late second with the quality of this draft class. I'd assume if you've got him, you're likely a contender. If he's in your lineup or your flex spot, I don't think you'll be getting a player back that can immediately contribute in the way David Johnson can. I mean, if you're contending, would you take DJ or would you take a rookie like Michael Carter in your lineups in 2021? See what I did there? I think the only time I'd move for him I'd move on from him is if he's your running back 3 or 4, where you're comfy losing running back and potentially not getting one back or not needing one straight away. I think you're going to struggle to move them and get a replacement at that value. We do know that to be fantasy viable, all you need to have is volume, and I think with him being the only guy in that backfield, it's probably more of a hold for me. But if I guess he's the only guy, there is going to be a compliment that comes in. What sort of rookie pick would you think could be good to groom behind David Johnson in Houston?
So which rookie would I like to see behind David Johnson?
Rookie running back, yeah. Maybe a Michael Carter.
They're going to have to pay up to get someone like Michael Carter, Kev. He's not going to be sitting behind. To be honest, if they did get somebody like Michael Carter, I think that would be a good spot for somebody like Carter, because I believe in his talent. And with DJ, as you say, he's not getting any younger. We know he's got the injury concerns, and that's something that's going to factor into it. So, I mean, if he has to sit behind DJ, it's probably only going to be for a few games, and then he gets the chance to show what he's got, and then I think he can take over that backfield. So I think if somebody like Carter did land there, I think that I'm perfectly fine with that. I think also somebody maybe like Chuba Hubbard, somebody a bit later on that's going to be drafted. I think his draft capital has taken a massive hit. So if somebody like that can land later on, I very much doubt the Texans are going to be targeting a running back, but they're obviously going to be in a bit of a rebuild with Deshaun Watson. I very much doubt that he's going to be hanging around. So I feel like the Texans are going to be coming into a rebuild, and I don't see running back as a key position to target. A bit like how we don't in fantasy. It's probably going to be one of the last positions that they address. So yeah, maybe one of these late rookies later on at a day 3 pick. Any of them that land there, I think it's potentially could be a nice spot. Seeing what happens with DJ in 2021.
Yeah, I like your Chuba pick, Matt. Well done.
Thank you, Kevin. Yeah, it's a compliment.
Yeah.
It's because I said you were lovely at the top of the show, Kev. You're trying to repay me now in a bit of a compliment.
It's because Rich ain't around anymore. Bad influence.
So we'll move on then, Kev. Who have you got next?
So again, I'm going to talk about the backfield. It's the Cardinals backfield. I think it's one of the most interesting running back groups entering this offseason as to what will happen with them. In 2020, the Cardinals got great fantasy success from their split backfield. Both Kenyon Drake and Chase Edmonds were top 25 at the position. Drake's now entering free agency. I've touted him to the Patriots, as you all know. And with Edmonds, he's interesting, but he's yet to eclipse 100 rush attempts in a season. So I can see a variety of ways the Cardinals could attack this position this offseason. How do you think this backfield works out, and will there be a player that you target in Dynasty?
I think it's going to be a nice potential landing spot for either a free agent or a rookie. Just with it being that air raid offense under Cliff Kingsbury, I just think it is a nice spot. We saw obviously what Kenyon Drake could do in 2019. Sadly, he didn't really show it too much in 2020, but he was still a solid running back, as you say, in 2020. I've seen a lot of people saying that Chase Edmonds is now going to get this backfield to himself. To be honest, I'm not too keen on that idea. What he did show when Drake was out injured, it were all right, but do you know what I mean? It wasn't what. I think they could definitely get a better running back that can definitely provide more to them and to us in fantasy. So, yeah, again, I'd be thinking any rookie that lands here, it'd be a great one. Travis Etienne again, obviously somebody that's explosive, that kind of guy. I think it's going to be a perfect fit on a backfield like this, or somebody that is good at receiving the ball. Somebody like Kenneth Gainwell, I think, could as well be a great player to land on an offense like this. Yeah, what do you think, Kevin? Is there anybody you've got in mind? Or I just saw you give me a little fist bump. Are you on board with Travis Etienne?
I mean, first of all, I want to know who's saying Chase Edmonds is going to be.
I've seen it.
I know.
I've seen it.
I mean, Chase Edmonds' mum must have a few burner accounts because, he's a nice complimentary piece, but he's never going to be the main guy. Stop with that. The guy I was thinking of, I sort of teed it up a little bit early on in the show. ETN for me, I think Phelan's that's absolutely nuts. I was going to mention him on the Jets side, but I just thought with them playing outdoors on the East Coast. I just think if he's in Arizona on that fast track indoors, that's wow. It's going to be pretty special if he ends up there. I'm praying he ends up there.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the better landing spots. In regards to the first round pick, could they potentially grab him with the first round pick? I mean, it could be a bit of a reach, but I think they've got picked 16 off the top of my head. I'm not too sure.
Banging middle, yeah.
Somewhere around there, yeah. So is that a reach? I mean, I think personally that they could potentially do something like that, but what do you think? Do you think that happens, or are you thinking more second round for these rookie running backs?
I've not looked too far ahead into the draft, but you've got to imagine if the quarterback falling like a Mac Jones, maybe a team wants to move up and ensure they get him. That would be a way they could trade down. I don't think he's going to be there at middle of round 2, and it's probably too early at middle of round 1. So yeah, it will be tricky, but yeah, I just think it's going to be really hard for a running back to go that early, especially with our analytics is sort of taking over the NFL, and with that such a talented class last year, we only had one RB going round one, and that was bang at the end for a team with pretty much no needs other than picking best player available.
Yeah, and just mentioning that, I'll just mention it now. I think Tampa Bay Buccaneers could potentially be just like what the Chiefs were. I mean, what do they need to improve? Really, I don't think they've got too much in that one position. I'm sorry to say it, Kev, but I think running back could be that position that they target. So, yeah, I mentioned it. I was on Dynasty Island's podcast yesterday, which will be dropping tomorrow, and I mentioned that as a nice landing spot, and I think it could definitely happen.
Spoiler alert.
Just a little tease, not a spoiler, guys. Right, so we'll move on then, because I've obviously upset you about slandering Ronald Jones again. So we'll move on then to the last guy, and I've gone for Austin Eckler. Obviously had that injury hit season last year. He missed 6 games due to a hamstring injury. Still finishes the RB26, but when on the field, still put up solid fantasy numbers, averaged 16.5 fantasy points per game in the 10 games that he did play. With Melvin Gordon leaving, Eckler took on that larger workload on the ground as well. He's obviously known for his pass catching ability, but yeah, he was definitely on pace for his highest amount of carries in a season. So that's obviously something that you love to see in regards to his fantasy production. And obviously the emergence of Justin Herbert as well, I think that could do wonders for somebody like Eckler in fantasy, and obviously opposing defense aren't going to be able to stack the box as much. So I just think it opens up the doors for somebody like Eckler to have a huge season in 2021. I did actually mention it mid-season again, Kev. I'm going to give myself another pat on the back, but I think Austin Eckler he's like an Alvin Kamara light for me. Everything he's got in his game, it pretty much echoes what Kamara does. Maybe not as well as Kamara, but I do think now, as I mentioned, with those things, with obviously Herbert and everything, and getting that little bit more workload, I think the potential is definitely there. And his ADP is RB17, so I think he can outperform that myself personally. What's your feelings on that ADP, Kev? Is it too low, too high, or is it about right for you?
I mean, this is like the Matt Dynasty appreciation show, isn't it? All these pats on back.
I'm usually a humble guy, Kev, but sometimes you've got to give yourself a little pat on the back.
No, I love it. I love Eckler as well. Such a huge fan of his. He only played 10 games in 2020, but still finishes an RB1 in fantasy points per game. Like I said, missed those 6 games, but it was still running back 5 in targets and receptions, highlighting that elite pass usage, vital for fantasy. He's in an offense tied to a better than advertised sophomore QB in Justin Herbert. The Chargers look likely to have a ton of vacated targets with the news Hunter Henry and your wide receiver one in Dynasty, Mike Williams, both set to hit free agency. He's currently running back 12 in my Dynasty rankings. He might drop a little bit further after I input the rookies, after they've got their landing spot, but I still think Eckler's a great value in Dynasty drafts. He's currently going on the round 4-5 turn. He's someone I'll be targeting as my running back 2 in Dynasty drafts. Are you a fan of his?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just going to put this out there, Kev, because I know there'll be people listening on the podcast and can't see my reaction when you say that my wide receiver one's Mike Williams. That's definitely not true. All right, it's just Kevin and is being horrible to me as usual. Yeah, definitely somebody I'll be targeting. As I say, Alvin Kamara light for me. So if I can get him that ADP, I think it's criminal. And I think the reason why was he an undrafted free agent, I believe, or either that or a very late pick. And I do think that plays into people's minds even now, even though what we've seen. We see it with somebody like James Robinson. I think it just still play on people's mind. They think, oh, well, they can easily move on from Eckler, but obviously he's now got that contract. He's shown what he can do. So, yeah, I mean, give me all the Eckler. If you can grab him that late on, I'm doing it all the time. And it's somebody that I'll definitely be targeting this offseason in my Dynasty leagues.
Would you be worried about the new head coach being sort of defensive minded? Maybe that tightens up the defense. I know last year the Chargers were meant to have a really solid defense on paper, and then they had a ton of injuries. So do you think if they do end up with an elite defense, that could harm him from a pass catching side of things potentially? Yeah,
from pass catching, obviously it does start to harm him, but I think, as I say, he's starting to see that more usage in the running game. So if we're talking about a solid defense, that usually translates to running backs getting plenty of carries. So I don't think he's ever going to be a guy that gets like a workhorse role. I definitely think there'll be somebody that comes in as the short yardage guy when they need to get the short yardage. But I wouldn't say it's too much of a problem. I think when you've got somebody with that kind of talent, I think you have to utilize somebody like that and the talents that they do have. You just mentioned as well with obviously Hunt Henry and Mike Williams, if they both move on, they're going to need somebody to catch the ball. So, I mean, why can't it be a guy out of the backfield like Eckler?
Yeah, and he's not got a ton of competition either on that team. There's sort of nothing. Guys like Josh Kelly's all right. Justin Jackson's fine. Kalen Ballage, just there's not a lot.
Hey, don't knock Kalen Ballage. He looked all right, didn't he, when he got the chance?
Oh my God!
Yeah, I didn't mind Josh Kelly myself, but yeah, he just seemed to fade away, didn't he? So it is going to be interesting to see who they do. I do think they're going to put somebody alongside Eckler, so it's going to be interesting to see who they do bring in. But I'm still a firm believer. I mean, we don't get worried about Alvin Kamara, do we, when we talk about somebody taking a few rushes off him? So yeah, it's not a concern for me, I don't think. So yeah. That's it, Kev. We've come to the end of the show, where obviously we've gone over the RB landscape from a dynasty perspective. So yeah, I just want to thank everybody for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe and follow us on Twitter at Fantasy Wildcard. We have it as Linktree out on his Twitter page as well, where you can find all his podcasts and shows on YouTube and what have you. Yeah, it's been a great show. Next Tuesday, we've got a guest coming on. We've got Richard Cooling. You might know as Dynasty Island, a guy that I mentioned that I appeared on his podcast that we're dropping tomorrow. We've got him in returning the favour and coming on ours, where we're going to be talking about the start of free agency. Obviously, today we've heard about Kenny Golladay, that he's not going to get tagged. So potential big free agent coming up there. And yeah, I think it's going to be a great show, Kev.
Yeah, it's going to be banging. I'm very excited. It's going to be pretty intense because we'll have a lot of information coming to us just at the start of free agency. But yeah, we'll do our best to put it in a nice, entertaining format for you.
Absolutely. It's going to be a good one. So yeah, thanks again, guys. Take care, and we'll see you next week.
Yeah, cheers. See you later.